Hello. Did you find the ending of 2521 really disappointing? I have to admit, part of me did. But then I thought about it a little and I realized that I had actually been expecting this ending, and my reaction to it was different from a lot of other people's who were watching it with me. Not only did I think that the drama completely stayed true to the themes it presented from the very beginning, I also thought that giving Nahido and Baek Hee-jin an ending where they don't live out the rest of their life with each other was actually perfectly in sync with the promise the drama made to us. This was a drama about youth, about relationships and friendships formed in one's youth, and the major influence it has on the rest of your life, but also how it's ephemeral and you can forget parts of it, even though it probably contributed to who you become later on. So, what I'm saying is that it is at once momentous and not that important in a person's long life. And that's what 2521 kind of gave us in this drama. Some perfect friendships, a really wonderful slow burn romance, and also a story about people who lived to achieve their dreams and become the people they were meant to become without love being the reason they conquered all. It's complex and it's earthy, and I'm quite okay without the happily ever after. And so the reason I decided to do this video was because, in a very simple way, I kind of wanted to go over the reasons I thought 2521 ended as perfectly as it could. And if you're feeling terribly disappointed over Nahido and Baek Hee-jin not growing old together as a married couple, then maybe consider a few of these and see if you feel any different.
10억 원 나오기 전에 나타날게. 기다려, 희도야.
The first thing I want to point out is that Baek Hee-jin and Nahido met each other exactly when they needed each other the most. Both of them were basically veterans of a long fight, and both of them were a little tired. They needed a little bit of support. Baek Hee-jin way more than Nahido. Nahido had a fixed star that she was running towards, and nothing would push her off that path. But even the most determined warrior could benefit from some amount of cheerleading, some amount of support, some amount of acknowledgement of the hard work that they're doing. And that's what Baek Hee-jin ended up doing for Nahido. He became the cheerleader she desperately needed in her life. And for Baek Hee-jin, Nahido became the inspiration he needed and the motivation to keep on fighting the battle, because he had been quietly trying to survive till he met Nahido. He had gone through a catastrophic situation where his family was completely scattered all over South Korea, and he wanted to do well enough that he could help his family somehow, but he couldn't see a way out. He had to drop out of college. He was doing a minimum wage job. He couldn't be anywhere near his family. Otherwise, the creditors would come and hound him. It was a really desperate way of living. And it was only in seeing Nahido fight so hard for what she wanted that he could find it in himself to dream again, to fight for a dream, and to be driven towards bettering himself. That probably wouldn't have happened for a long time for this boy, and maybe even never, if Nahido's presence in his life hadn't pulled him out of the depressive period he had fallen into. So at that age, when Nahido was on the cusp of 18 and Baek Hee-jin was, 21, when they met for the first time, they were the perfect people to help the other.
여름은 우리 거다!
The second point is that even while the drama is setting this up for us, setting up this perfect friendship, the drama, because of the framing of it, because we are seeing this halcyon period of Nahido's life through the eyes of her daughter reading her diary, everything is just rose tinted. every moment that she's reading, it's either epically tragic or wonderfully happy. Everything is perfect because of the way teenage Nahido had been writing it in her diary, which is a framing that holds up only as long as adult Nahido in her 40s doesn't come into conflict with it. Because when her daughter asks her a question about her teenage years and Nahido reacts as if she has no memory of it, the audience kind of reels, because what about that wonderful summer day on the beach that was completely unforgettable to you? It was the summer of your youth, the perfect day, the day you spent with your friends. You went on a field trip. You'd never gone on a field trip before. You spent it with your crush, Baek. It was the perfect summer day on the beach. And then 40-year-old Nahido doesn't even remember it anymore, because as glorified as it is through the lens of her diary, adult Nahido has gone through quite a bit since that time. And that part of her life has receded to mostly nostalgia and not something that she desperately needs to hold on to or take succor from. What I'm getting to is that the drama is very self-aware, that teenage Nahido and Baek-jin's story seems terribly romantic. But when you zoom out of it and look at Nahido's entire life, that was just one period. It was a great period. It meant a lot to her. But it was one period of her entire life. And she's had quite a few other periods with other momentous things that have happened. So, yes, it meant a lot, but it wasn't everything.
그냥 팬이야, 팬! 고마워! 잘 쓸게!
The drama was also very smart in establishing that the great love of Nahido's life wasn't Baek-jin. It was actually Koyurim. Koyurim was the one who drove her for years so that she could become as good as her idol, that she could someday stand across the mat from the one that she adores and fight her foil to foil. Be her equal, be better than her, be her actual rival. And she got that. That was honestly probably the great romance of her life. Because think of just the drama of it. Koyurim, in many ways, is her North Star. She looks at Koyurim from a distance and strives towards getting to where Koyurim is. And even once she reaches her idol and they become friends and rivals, the story doesn't end there. She surpasses Koyurim. They have their great matches, like televised and with entire countries rooting for and against them. And then they remain, supporters of each other. It's a saga that spans decades of their lives. That, honestly, is the real romance. And you got every moment of it in this drama.
이 사랑이 나한테 힘이 되지 않아.
There is a line that Nahido says during their big fight, right when they break up. She says, "Your love doesn't nourish me anymore." And before she says that, everything else that they're arguing about, nothing felt final. Like, as the audience, while I was listening to them fight, all of that sounded very serious. But I also thought they could get over it. They will probably get over it. None of this sounds like something that would completely break them apart. They just really need to work through it, but they can. And then she said that, "Your love doesn't nourish me anymore." And at that moment, I was convinced. I kind of realized that they aren't going to go back to the way they were anymore. And even Baek-jin says,
솔직히 네 응원 힘에 붙였어.
the fact that Baek-jin could say that about her support, the thing that had kind of pushed him onto this career of becoming a journalist, and the fact that she could say that about his love for her, the thing that had helped guard her and again push her along her own path, kind of told you everything that you needed to know about these two. They were good people. They were really wonderful people. But they had reached a part of their life where the two of them no longer really needed each other, not in that way. And their relationship, as wonderful as it was to us as viewers, we saw the highlights of it. And they were basically best when they were together supporting each other. But if that support has started to burden and hurt and corrode emotions in each other, then it was no longer something they needed in their lives. And Nahido saying that his love doesn't nourish her anymore, and understanding how hurtful this can be and how destructive to what they have and how miserable it can make both of them is very Nahido. I thought it was exactly right that Nahido should be the one to recognize it and point it out. It's deeply painful, but she had always been the one to recognize things and say them as they are.
나이도 선수?
반갑습니다.
Towards the end of the drama, I also realized that for both Baek Hee-jin and Nahido, it's not so much that they chose their careers over love. It was more that they chose things that made them feel alive and happy over an ephemeral emotion that they could feel eroding over time. They both meant a lot to each other, but it would have been a bigger heartbreak if Nahido had started suffering emotionally and mentally and started failing at her sport, or if Baek Hee-jin had to give up his New York sport, which he clearly really wanted so he could stay close to Nahido. The fact that Baek Hee-jin even applied for that spot without discussing it with Nahido, without taking his future relationship into account, kind of already told you where his head was at. It wasn't anybody's fault. It was simply that they had started drifting down slightly different paths and they were happy trotting down those paths. They wished those paths were parallel, but they weren't. And at some point, they had to recognize it. And it would have been, honestly, a bigger tragedy if either of them had to leave their own path to somewhat stay with the other person. They would have resented it deeply, and that should not have been the ending for Nahido and Baek Hee-jin.
그래.
이런 사랑도 해보자, 나이도.
The final point for me is that we have seen a lot of movies and dramas show us ephemeral relationships happening in youth, in the formative years of life, that has a deep effect on the rest of our protagonist's life. And usually the way this is set up is that like two young people fall in love and then they are tragically torn apart. One person falls fatally ill, is killed by a truck of doom, is forcefully married to someone else. Some external force comes and separates our lovebirds. Basically, these stories usually have the message that if they weren't separated forcefully, the two of them would have led the rest of their life together. Because if you mean so much to each other, of course you would want to grow old together. But I like this better, that you can have your greatest love happening in one part of your life. You can have a really meaningful relationship happen, and it's not the person that you spend the rest of your life with. And it's not the relationship you would choose over every other aspect of your own life. That it's possible to have a terrific, memorable romance and still kind of want to end it and move on. And you do see Baek Hee-jin and Nahido move on. We don't see Baek Hee-jin in his late 40s like we see Nahido, but from all indications, the two of them have lived full lives. Nahido doesn't look back on that part of her life with regrets. She looks back at that part of her life with nostalgia, with a feeling of fondness, and maybe with some amount of guilt for the way she broke up with Baek Hee-jin. And I kind of wish she had her final goodbye with him, not through a mysteriously preserved diary being passed around through decades, but face to face. It would have just been a lot more them. I wish that was a choice the drama had made differently. I would have also genuinely liked it if the two of them could have become friends after a few years of separation. The fact that they chose to stay on separate paths and not even mingle socially through their common friends tells you that they felt deeply hurt by the way they broke up. It meant a lot to each other. And that leaves you with a tinge of sadness with the way things ended. Yes, it does. And maybe it should because it meant so much. But it doesn't take over their lives, is what I'm trying to say. Those 3-4 years of knowing each other, falling in love, and having a relationship is not all that Baek Hae-jin and Nahido are, nor should it be. There was a sparkling sliver of time out of their lives, and it was precious, but it wasn't the sum of who they were. Their life went on, and from all indications, they got over each other. And that's a story I quite liked watching.